Rain fell in a relentless drizzle, blurring the edges of the city street. Neon signs flickered above shuttered storefronts, casting fragmented light across puddles that mirrored the gray sky. On the corner of an otherwise empty block, two siblings struggled to set up a small, makeshift table. A stack of homemade books lay unevenly in front of them, their spines bent and corners frayed. The cover illustrations were hand-drawn, colored with crayons that had smudged in places. The words inside sometimes crooked and uneven, yet every page spoke of care, of effort, of hope. Lucas, the older of the two at 12, arranged the books carefully, brushing rainwater off the tablecloth. His sister Emma, 10, tugged at his sleeve nervously. "Lucas, maybe we should just go home." "It's raining and no one's stopping," she whispered. Her voice trembled, carrying both fear and determination. Lucas shook his head, setting his jaw. "No, we can't give up now. Dad needs his medicine, and these are the last books we have left." His eyes darted toward the small apartment building just across the street. Through the rain-streaked windows, he could see the outline of their father, slumped on the couch, coughing softly. He looked fragile, a shadow of the man who had once been their protector, their storyteller, their guide. Every cough tightened Lucas's chest. The thought of failing him was unbearable. Emma nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. "Okay, but what if no one buys them?" Her small hands clutched the edges of a book she had made herself. Titled, Adventures in the Sky, a story she had spent weeks illustrating with drawings of clouds, birds and imaginary creatures. Before Lucas could respond, a group of teenagers walked past, laughing and oblivious. They didn't glance at the table. The siblings' faces fell. Lucas's hands shook slightly as he rearranged the books. "We have to keep trying." "We have to," he muttered under his breath. Hours passed in this quiet, desperate rhythm. Passers-by ignored them, giving polite nods or sidelong glances, but no purchases were made. Emma's fingers were numb from the damp and Lucas's shoes were soaked. Yet neither gave up. Each time someone paused, each time a stranger even looked at their books, their hearts leaped. The city seemed enormous, indifferent, yet they clung to hope with a stubbornness only children could possess. Across the street, a black luxury car slowed at the intersection. The rain-slicked pavement reflected its sleek lines like liquid obsidian. From it stepped Evelyn Chambers, a name that carried weight across the nation. A billionaire businesswoman, a figure of precision and control, renowned for her sharp mind and sharper deals. Her heels clicked against the wet sidewalk, a sound that cut through the background of splattering rain and distant traffic. Her tailored suit was immaculate, the fabric unbothered by the drizzle, her hair pulled back in a tight professional bun. To anyone observing, she seemed untouchable, part of another world entirely. Yet as she passed the corner where the siblings stood, something made her pause. Perhaps it was the intensity in their eyes, a determination so raw it could not be ignored. Perhaps it was the tiny red and blue book Emma clutched, the pages curling from the rain, a testament to love and effort. Evelyn's brow furrowed slightly. She was not accustomed to noticing the small struggles of the world around her. Her life had always been defined by power, efficiency, and results. But now she found herself leaning against a nearby column. Watching, Emma straightened, her small voice carrying across the wet street. "Excuse me, would you like to buy a book?" Evelyn's gaze flicked to her, then to Lucas, then back to the table. She hesitated, unsure why she felt compelled to respond. Then softly, almost to herself, she said, "How much for one?" The siblings froze. The question was simple, almost mundane, yet it carried hope, a kind of validation they hadn't expected. Lucas glanced at Emma, then back at the woman. $3, please," he said, his voice shaking slightly, more from disbelief than the cold. Evelyn reached into her purse, extracting a card she never used for small transactions. She tapped it against the reader with a faint smile. The transaction was completed before Lucas or Emma could protest, but the moment itself lingered, a spark of connection that neither side fully understood yet. You want more?" Lucas asked cautiously. Evelyn shook her head. "No, I think this is enough for now, but I'd like to hear about your book, if you'll tell me." Her voice was quiet, inviting, almost hesitant. a far cry from the commanding tones she used in boardrooms and board meetings. The rain eased, leaving the streets glistening and slick. The siblings, emboldened by the first sign of kindness, began to tell Evelyn about their stories. Emma described the adventures she had written for imaginary heroes, each line animated by her gestures. Lucas spoke about the magical creatures he had created and how each story carried a lesson their father had taught them. Evelyn listened, rapt, her hand resting unconsciously on the edge of the table. Inside her mind, memories she had long suppressed began to surface, memories of her own childhood struggles, of a brother she had lost, of helplessness she had buried under years of wealth and control. For the first time in decades, she felt a pang of empathy so strong it unsettled her. The children's courage, their love for a parent, it pierced her carefully constructed armor. She glanced across the street, where their father was coughing again. She could see the strain in his posture, the pallor of his skin through the window. The urgency of the situation hit her fully, igniting a desire to help that had little to do with charity and everything to do with human connection. Evelyn stepped closer. "Would you like some help keeping these books safe from the rain?" she asked, pulling her umbrella from her bag. The siblings looked at each other, unsure if this stranger could be trusted, yet hope shone too brightly to ignore. "Thank you," Emma whispered. The umbrella shielded the table and the children, their small books glistening but unharmed. Evelyn crouched slightly to be closer to their level, listening intently as Lucas explained how the money from the books would go directly to his father's medical bills. Every word they spoke, every earnest glance tugged at something inside her that had long been dormant. Hours passed in a haze of small victories and setbacks. More people stopped, curious about the trio huddled under the umbrella. Some bought books, some offered encouraging words, and some simply walked on, lost in their own lives. Yet for Evelyn, every glance, every story, every tear from Emma or Lucas felt monumental. She felt herself being drawn into a world she had long ignored, a world where hope, love, and desperation intertwined in ways no business deal ever could. A sudden cough from the father, sharper this time, drew Evelyn's attention again. Her brow furrowed in concern. Without thinking, she glanced at the siblings. "I think your father needs more than books right now," she said gently. "I can help. I know people who can help. But I need you to trust me." The children's eyes widened. Trust was not something freely given, especially after months of struggle and disappointment. But something in Evelyn's calm presence, her seriousness, her willingness to act, made them hesitate before nodding. As the rain began to taper off entirely, the siblings packed up their remaining books, their small hands trembling. Lucas noticed the muddy water pooling near the corner of the table, threatening to ruin their precious inventory. Evelyn acted swiftly, using her umbrella and a cloth she had pulled from her bag to protect the books. The simple gesture, the care in her movements, spoke volumes. "You're not alone," she said quietly. "I won't let your efforts go to waste." In that moment, the children felt a spark of hope, brighter than they had allowed themselves in months. And Evelyn, the billionaire who had built her life on wealth and control, felt something she hadn't in decades: purpose, compassion, and a connection she could no longer deny. The rain had ended, but the storm of events she had stepped into was only beginning. What started as a simple act of buying a book would soon unfold into a journey none of them could have imagined, a journey that would challenge Evelyn's heart, transform the siblings' lives, and lead to a heartbreaking twist no one saw coming. Emotional connection established. Stakes made clear. Father's illness, children's desperation. The next morning dawned crisp and bright. The remnants of yesterday's rain shimmering on the city streets like scattered diamonds. Evelyn Chambers awoke in her penthouse suite, the soft light of early sunlight spilling across polished floors and pristine furnishings. Her mind was not on emails or board meetings as it usually would have been. Instead, it lingered on Lucas and Emma, the two small figures she had met on a rainy street corner, braving the elements with nothing but hope and the courage of their hearts. She had spent the night replaying their words in her mind. "Dad needs his medicine." The phrase had echoed through her consciousness, a haunting refrain she could not ignore. She rose, dressed swiftly in a simple yet elegant outfit, and made her way to her office. The billionaire who commanded markets and negotiated billion-dollar deals now sat before a blank spreadsheet, her mind working through a plan far different from any corporate strategy she had ever devised. First, she would need to know more. Evelyn began with what she had, the small hints the children had given her, the fragments of conversation she had overheard as they worked to sell their handmade books. She found a local pharmacy that might carry the medication their father needed, a small independent establishment that could expedite the prescription. Next, she searched for their apartment building, a modest structure that seemed out of place amidst the gleaming towers of the financial district. And then she contacted a courier service, arranging for supplies that could support the siblings until she could meet them again. By mid-morning, she was on the streets once more, this time not as a distant observer, but as an active participant in their struggle. She arrived at the corner where Lucas and Emma had set up their table, but the children were nowhere in sight. Her brow furrowed. She approached a nearby vendor, a friendly man who sold hot coffee and pastries. "Have you seen two kids, a boy and a girl, selling books around here?" she asked. The vendor smiled faintly. "Yeah, they were here a bit ago. Moved down the street. Something about their dad being sick, trying to make ends meet." Evelyn nodded, heart tightening. She had expected resistance or mistrust, but the city itself seemed to conspire in their struggle, shifting them down the block like pieces in a game of chance. She followed, finally spotting them outside a small, slightly run-down apartment building. Lucas held a hand-drawn sign, and Emma stood beside him, shivering slightly in the morning chill. "Lucas, Emma," Evelyn called out, hurrying forward. The children turned, surprise and caution flickering across their faces. You're back," Lucas said cautiously, shielding Emma slightly. Evelyn nodded, lowering herself to their level. "I couldn't stop thinking about you two. And your dad. I want to help. Can you trust me?" Trust was a fragile commodity, and these children had been let down before. Yet the sincerity in Evelyn's eyes, the absence of pretense, spoke volumes. Slowly Lucas nodded, glancing at Emma. We can try," he whispered. Over the next few hours, Evelyn worked with the children to gather the resources their father desperately needed. She visited the pharmacy, negotiated with the staff to expedite a prescription, and arranged for a series of deliveries that would keep him supplied. Lucas and Emma watched in awe, their admiration mixed with disbelief. They had met many strangers, but none had the command, the presence, or the willingness to step directly into their lives as Evelyn had. The siblings began to share more with her, small stories of their father, once a lively man who had told tales of adventure and courage before illness struck him down. They described nights of worry, mornings of hope, and the tiny victories of selling a single book to someone passing by. Evelyn listened, absorbing every detail, letting herself feel emotions she had buried under years of business ruthlessness. "You're doing so much for us," Emma said, voice trembling. "Why?" Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. She hesitated, then said simply, "Because I can, and because no child should have to face this alone." As the afternoon wore on, Evelyn made the decision to accompany the children to their father's apartment. The man inside was frail, sitting slumped on a worn couch, his breathing shallow. Lucas and Emma rushed to him, their small arms encircling his shoulders. The father's eyes widened at the sight of Evelyn, confusion mixing with hope. This is who?" he asked weakly. "These are the people helping us, Dad," Lucas said softly. She's going to help us get your medicine," the father blinked, trying to process. Evelyn knelt beside him, her voice gentle. "I know things have been difficult. I want to help. I can make sure you get what you need, and I'll help your children along the way." His lips trembled, forming a hesitant smile. Why would someone like you?" "Because it's the right thing," Evelyn replied simply. The simplicity of the words, the absolute certainty, seemed to pierce through the layers of pain and fatigue he carried. For the first time in months, the small apartment was filled with a sense of hope. The father's medicine arrived within hours, thanks to Evelyn's connections, and the siblings began to feel that their struggle might finally be met with support. Yet, just as relief began to settle over them, a new complication emerged. The father, once alert and cautious, now grew suspicious. "I don't want charity," he insisted. "We can manage. We don't need anyone else's help." His voice was soft but firm, tinged with pride and fear. Lucas and Emma glanced at Evelyn, uncertainty clouding their eyes. Evelyn's patience was tested, but she did not falter. "I'm not here to take control or make you feel indebted," she said carefully. "I want to help you stand on your own, not replace what you've built. But right now, your children's efforts, their love, and their hope, they need support. Let me be that support." The father's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of gratitude, pride, and shame. He looked at his children, then at Evelyn, silently weighing his stubbornness against the truth of his situation. Finally, with a small nod, he accepted, allowing Evelyn to guide them in setting up a proper system to ensure the children could continue their book selling without further risk or danger. But just as hope began to settle over them like a fragile blanket, the first twist arrived, a twist that would deepen the stakes and test the newly formed bond between the children and Evelyn. A man arrived at the apartment building, wearing a sharp suit and an expression that made Lucas instinctively tense. He flashed a badge, though the words were partially obscured, and his voice was clipped. "Sir, we need to speak with you regarding an overdue medical debt. Failure to comply may result in immediate action." The father's face paled. Lucas gripped Emma's hand, fear flaring in both their hearts. Evelyn stepped forward, her presence radiating authority and calm. "Let me handle this," she said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. The man hesitated, clearly not accustomed to being challenged. Evelyn's mind raced. This was no ordinary debt collector. This was a situation that could escalate, could undo everything she had worked to accomplish. She had to act, and she had to act fast. In a swift, decisive move, Evelyn pulled out her phone, contacting her legal team. Within minutes, a call from a lawyer verified the father's rights and halted any immediate action. The man departed, leaving a lingering sense of tension that hung over the small apartment like a storm cloud. The siblings clung to Evelyn, their faith in her now absolute, their hope renewed but tempered by the stark reminder of reality. The father, once proud and defiant, looked at Evelyn with a newfound respect, and perhaps even a spark of trust. That evening, as the rain returned softly outside the window, Evelyn sat with Lucas and Emma at their small kitchen table, helping them organize the remaining books. Each page they touched was now a symbol, not just of effort but of resilience, courage, and the unexpected arrival of someone who cared deeply enough to intervene. "You're amazing," Lucas whispered, eyes wide. "I don't know how to thank you." Evelyn smiled, a warmth she had long denied herself settling in her chest. "You don't have to. Just keep believing in yourselves. That's thanks enough." But as the children went to bed, exhausted yet buoyed by hope, Evelyn knew the story was far from over. The twist of the debt collector's arrival was a reminder. Life's challenges were relentless, and the path to helping this family would not be simple. Yet she felt a strange, thrilling certainty. She was not just observing their struggle anymore, she was part of it, and she would not turn away. The stakes had risen. The bond between Evelyn and the siblings had deepened. And the first major twist had set the stage for a journey that would challenge hearts, reveal secrets, and ultimately deliver the kind of shocking, emotional payoff that would leave viewers breathless. The week following the debt collector incident unfolded like a quiet storm. The apartment, once fraught with fear and uncertainty, now hummed with tentative hope. Lucas and Emma had begun to trust Evelyn completely, following her instructions for organizing their book sales and managing their father's medications. Every day they saw her not as a stranger, but as someone who had chosen to step into their lives and carry some of their burden. Evelyn, in turn, found herself unexpectedly drawn into their small world. She visited schools with them to pick up assignments, helped them prepare for book fairs, and even played board games at their kitchen table. Simple moments that brought laughter and warmth she had long forgotten. It was exhausting work, certainly, but unlike the ceaseless pressure of corporate life, this felt meaningful. Every smile she coaxed from Lucas or Emma was a victory. Every small success a reminder that her influence could heal, not just command. Yet beneath the surface, subtle tensions simmered. The father, though grateful, remained hesitant to fully embrace her assistance. Old habits of pride and stubborn independence clashed with the newfound dependence he had on Evelyn. He would refuse help with daily tasks, insisting he could manage, yet the worry in his eyes betrayed his struggle. Evelyn realized that trust, once broken or withheld, required patience and care to rebuild. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn accompanied the siblings to the local library, intending to stock up on books for their sales. The library smelled of polished wood and faint ink, a comforting scent that made her think of her own childhood. A childhood she had long buried beneath spreadsheets and boardroom meetings. Lucas and Emma darted between shelves, eager to find adventure novels and science guides, their small hands gripping books with a reverence that warmed her heart. As they approached the checkout desk, a librarian called out to Evelyn. "Excuse me, are you here with the children? We need a parent or guardian signature for these books." Evelyn hesitated, caught off guard. She had been officially a stranger, a helper from nowhere. But the librarian's insistence forced her to acknowledge her growing role in the children's lives. I'll sign," she said, surprising herself with the ease of the decision. The librarian glanced at her skeptically, then nodded. "Thank you. Just make sure they take care of these. They're expensive volumes." Evelyn signed, a small thrill of legitimacy running through her. For the first time, she felt she wasn't merely an outsider offering temporary assistance. She was stepping into something permanent. Lucas and Emma squealed with delight, clutching their books as they left the library, dragging Evelyn along in their excitement. Back at the apartment, the evening brought a quiet, intimate moment. The father had gone to bed early, exhausted, leaving Evelyn and the children alone in the living room. Lucas and Emma, eager to show off their newfound knowledge, began explaining the stories and scientific facts they had discovered in the library books. Evelyn listened intently, occasionally asking questions that challenged their thinking, encouraging their curiosity. "You're really smart," Evelyn said, smiling warmly. "Did you know some of these discoveries you're reading about are things even adults struggle to understand?" Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Even grown-ups?" Evelyn nodded. "Even grown-ups. That's why it's so important to learn early." "You're ahead of the game," Lucas beamed. "So that means we can teach Dad too." Evelyn laughed softly. "Exactly. And I think he'll be impressed with how much you've learned." But as the laughter filled the room, Evelyn noticed a small stack of letters tucked in the corner, partially hidden beneath an old table. Curiosity piqued, she asked the children about them. Lucas hesitated. Those are letters Dad never wanted us to see. They're from someone a long time ago." Emma's voice was barely audible. "Mom, we never knew her. And Dad doesn't talk about her." Evelyn's heart tightened. Secrets lingered like shadows in this small apartment, fragments of a past that shaped the present. She asked gently, "Do you want to show me?" The children glanced at each other, uncertainty battling with their desire for trust. Finally, Lucas nodded, carefully lifting the letters. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, clearly from someone who had once mattered deeply to their father. As Evelyn read silently, her eyes widened. These weren't just letters of affection. They hinted at decisions, sacrifices, and regrets that had shaped the father's life long before illness had struck. The revelation added a new layer of complexity to the family dynamic. Evelyn realized that helping the children meant not only ensuring their present safety and comfort, but also confronting the emotional legacy left behind. The father's reluctance to accept help was no longer just pride. It was the weight of past choices and unresolved grief. That night, Evelyn stayed longer than usual, helping the siblings organize the letters and decide which ones to keep. She taught them the importance of memory, of understanding their father's history without letting it define their future. Lucas and Emma listened, hanging on every word, their young minds processing both loss and love in equal measure. Yet just as comfort began to settle over the small apartment, a second twist arrived. A call came from the father's former employer, a man with influence and a vested interest in controlling every aspect of the father's financial affairs. "We've noticed your unpaid accounts and ongoing medical needs," the voice said coldly. "It's imperative that you meet with us immediately, or consequences will follow." The father froze, fear flickering in his eyes. Lucas and Emma clutched each other, panic rising. Evelyn stepped forward, calm and commanding. "We'll handle this," she said, her voice leaving no room for hesitation. She immediately began planning, arranging legal counsel, and ensuring that the father's rights would be protected. This twist served a dual purpose. It heightened the stakes and tested the bond Evelyn had begun to form with the siblings. It wasn't just about helping. They now had to defend their newfound stability against a powerful, unseen adversary. Over the next days, Evelyn's involvement deepened. She accompanied the father to meetings, negotiated on his behalf, and shielded the children from stress they were too young to bear. Through it all, Lucas and Emma's admiration for her grew. They no longer saw her as just a helper. They saw her as a protector, a guide, and eventually a member of their family. Evelyn herself began to change. The rigid, controlled persona she had cultivated for decades softened. She laughed more freely, allowed herself moments of vulnerability, and discovered joy in the small, mundane victories of family life. The children's resilience and trust inspired her, reminding her that true strength wasn't measured in wealth or power, but in the capacity to love and protect those who mattered most. The hidden secrets, once a source of tension, became a bridge to deeper understanding. The father, witnessing Evelyn's dedication, slowly began to release his pride. He allowed the children to show him what they had learned, encouraged their small victories, and even expressed gratitude for Evelyn's unwavering support. By the end of Section 3, the stage was set for the next major turning point. Bonds had deepened, secrets had been partially revealed, and the family unit, fragile yet resilient, was beginning to solidify. But external pressures remained, and Evelyn knew that further twists awaited. Challenges that would test their courage, trust, and the strength of their newly formed connection. The tension that had been quietly simmering for weeks erupted one sweltering afternoon. Evelyn had just finished helping Lucas and Emma organize the latest batch of books for a charity sale when her phone buzzed insistently. The display flashed a message from the father's former employer. Immediate meeting. Non-compliance will result in legal action. Evelyn's stomach tightened. The threat wasn't vague. It was precise and menacing, aimed at destabilizing the fragile equilibrium they had built. She glanced at Lucas and Emma, who were completely absorbed in their homework, unaware of the storm brewing just outside their apartment door. Her instincts kicked in. "Kids, I need you to focus for a bit while I handle something important," she said softly, masking urgency with calm authority. They nodded, though worry flickered across Emma's face. Evelyn promised herself that whatever happened next, she would protect them. The meeting took place in a sleek corporate office, cold and impersonal. The former employer, Mr. Grayson, exuded an air of calculated dominance, his eyes scanning Evelyn with undisguised skepticism. "You've been interfering," he began, his voice icy. "The father's accounts are not under your control. You are not family. Step back or face consequences." Evelyn held his gaze steadily. "I am not here to interfere. I'm here to ensure that the children and their father are safe. That includes protecting them from financial and legal threats you may impose." Grayson leaned back in his leather chair, smirking. "You underestimate the influence I wield. Compliance is non-negotiable." Evelyn's mind raced. She could not allow this man to destabilize their lives. She presented meticulous documentation, updated medical reports, evidence of the father's deteriorating health, and legal authority validating her temporary guardianship. Each document landed like a calculated strike, carefully dismantling Grayson's arguments, yet Grayson had one final card, a claim that the children's welfare might be jeopardized if they remained under her guidance. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Then why have the children flourished under my care? Look at their grades, their emotional growth, the bonds we've formed. I am the only person who has been consistently here for them." Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Lucas and Emma were growing anxious. The absence of Evelyn and their father's odd behavior had thrown them into a spiral of worry. "Where is she?" Lucas asked, fidgeting with a pencil. Emma's voice trembled. "Do you think something's wrong?" The father, usually stoic and reserved, finally broke. He sat beside them on the couch, uncharacteristically vulnerable. I didn't want to worry you, he admitted. But there are adults who want to take control of things that are yours, and I couldn't let them hurt you or your future. Lucas's small hand found his father's. We're scared. Dad, Emma whispered. We want Evelyn back. Tears pricked the father's eyes. Emotions he had long buried surfacing. He realized fully how indispensable Evelyn had become, not just as a caretaker, but as a stabilizing force that gave him hope he hadn't felt in years. Back at the office, Evelyn faced Grayson's final ultimatum: sign documents relinquishing control or face litigation. She paused, knowing that legal battles could drag on for months and devastate the family emotionally. She needed a plan, something decisive that would leave no room for doubt. Drawing on her corporate expertise, she made a bold move. I will not sign under duress, but I am willing to go to court immediately. Let the judge decide who acts in the children's best interest. I have proof, documentation, and witnesses. I am confident justice will prevail. Grayson sneered, but understood the weight of her challenge. Evelyn's confidence and preparation forced him into a corner. He realized that any further aggression would backfire, potentially exposing his own questionable practices. Reluctantly, he signaled the meeting's end. The battle, however, was only half the story. Evelyn returned home to find the apartment enveloped in quiet tension. Lucas and Emma rushed into her arms, relief flooding their young faces. The father followed, a mixture of pride and vulnerability in his gaze. I saw everything, Lucas whispered. You were amazing, Emma nodded, tears streaming. You didn't let them take us away. Evelyn hugged them tightly, emotions she had kept controlled for decades finally breaking. She realized that this wasn't about winning or losing against Grayson. It was about safeguarding the family she had grown to love. That night, as the city's lights flickered beyond the apartment windows, Evelyn and the father sat together in quiet reflection. He admitted, voice thick with emotion. I never knew I could rely on someone like you. I've always tried to do everything myself, but you've shown me the strength in letting others in. Evelyn's hand brushed his. We're stronger together. I never wanted to replace anyone, but I wanted to make sure your children, and you, were safe. The confession deepened the bond between them. For the first time, the father saw her not just as a helper or corporate ally, but as a partner in life, someone capable of love, resilience, and unwavering commitment. Meanwhile, the children's resilience surprised everyone. Lucas and Emma organized a small impromptu celebration, decorating the apartment with homemade banners that read, Family Wins, and We Are Safe. Their laughter filled the space, a triumphant soundtrack to a hard-fought victory. Evelyn watched them, heart full, realizing that the real victory wasn't legal. It was emotional. The family had survived threats, secrets, and fear. They had emerged stronger, more connected, and ready to face whatever life would throw next. The ultimate test had forged something unbreakable. The father's initial resistance had dissolved into trust. The children's fear had been replaced with hope and admiration. And Evelyn, who had entered their lives as an outsider, had become the glue holding their fragile world together. Yet as the night drew on, a lingering question remained. How would the family navigate the future beyond this battle? There were still bills, health challenges, and life lessons waiting. But for the first time, Evelyn and the family believed in themselves and in each other. The first rays of dawn spilled across the city, touching the apartment with golden light. Evelyn stood at the window, watching Lucas and Emma dart across the rooftop playground below, their laughter ringing through the morning air like music. For the first time in months, everything felt complete. Not perfect, no, life was never perfect, but it was alive, vibrant, and real. The father approached, coffee in hand, carrying a tentative smile that seemed foreign yet welcomed. They're growing faster than I can keep up, he said softly. Evelyn turned, meeting his gaze. And you're finally letting yourself enjoy it. He chuckled, a sound that carried relief, pride, and a hint of wonder. I think I've learned that the hardest part isn't keeping control. The hardest part is trusting. She stepped closer, brushing her hand against his. And trusting doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger. Strong enough to face anything. The children came bounding in, still carrying small trophies from an impromptu rooftop game of baseball. Lucas held a makeshift medal he had crafted from a bottle cap, while Emma presented a tiny bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered on her way down. Mom. "Mr. Cole," Lucas called, his voice a mixture of pride and excitement. "Look what we made for you." Evelyn knelt down, accepting the gifts with a warmth that radiated through the room. The father crouched beside her, allowing himself to be pulled into the children's exuberance. The small, simple gestures, the bottle cap medal, the flowers, the beaming smiles, symbolized far more than trophies or trinkets. They were proof of a family finally coming together after months of uncertainty, fear, and doubt. Over breakfast, the aroma of pancakes and freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen. The father watched Evelyn move with ease, flipping pancakes with practiced precision, her laughter bubbling naturally as the children competed over syrup and toppings. Lucas had declared today a syrup war, while Emma had appointed herself the official pancake judge. "You two need to eat before school," the father said gently, a note of humor threading through his usually serious tone. "No problem, Dad," the children chorused, glancing at him with a trust and comfort that had only grown in recent months. As they ate, Evelyn and the father exchanged subtle glances. No words were necessary. Their shared glance carried years of unspoken understanding. The battles fought, the tears shed, and the victories won. The previous weeks had been a whirlwind of challenges. Grayson's legal threats had tested not only Evelyn's resourcefulness, but also the family's unity. The father had learned to accept help without shame, and the children had grown resilient, their courage tempered by adversity. Together, they had emerged stronger, each member's confidence and love reinforcing the other. After school, the family decided to take a spontaneous trip to a nearby park, a sprawling green space that had become a favorite for its open fields and hidden nooks. Lucas and Emma raced ahead, their footsteps kicking up dust as they explored every corner. Evelyn and the father followed, walking side by side, their hands brushing occasionally in a quiet rhythm that spoke of comfort, trust, and affection. The father paused, watching the children's joy ripple through the open space. "I never imagined happiness like this after everything," he admitted softly. Evelyn smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and compassion. "It's not about imagining it. It's about building it together." They arrived at a small pond where ducks floated lazily across the shimmering water. Lucas immediately began sketching the scene in his notebook, while Emma tried to entice a group of birds closer with crumbs of bread she had brought along. Evelyn leaned against the father, the sun warming their shoulders, and felt a serenity she hadn't known in years. That evening, back at the apartment, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The father had been quietly preparing a surprise for the children and Evelyn, something that would mark the turning point in their journey from a fractured family to an inseparable unit. "Close your eyes," he instructed the children, who giggled in unrestrained excitement. When they opened them, they found the living room transformed. Twinkling fairy lights adorned the walls, handmade decorations hung from the ceiling, and in the center was a small table piled with books, games, and a few carefully wrapped gifts. "We call it our family night corner," Lucas announced proudly, eyes sparkling with delight. Emma clapped her hands, nearly toppling over in excitement. "This is amazing. We can have story time, game time, everything together." Evelyn's heart swelled. "This is perfect. Just what we needed." The father smiled, a rare, unguarded expression lighting his features. "We've come a long way," he said quietly, "and this is only the beginning." They spent the evening reading stories aloud, laughing through board games and building block towers that collapsed in spectacular fashion. Each crash met with peals of laughter. The children's energy filled the apartment with warmth and life, while Evelyn and the father shared quiet moments of gratitude and recognition. Weeks later, with the legal threats behind them and the family firmly established, Evelyn and the father decided to make their commitment official in a symbolic way, not a formal ceremony, but a private vow exchange in the small park by the pond where they had shared so many afternoons. The father had brought a simple ring, a vintage piece he had inherited from his grandmother, polished and prepared with care. Evelyn, moved to tears, held his hand tightly as he spoke. "I promise to protect you, the children, and our life together. Today I promise to love you and cherish this family we've built every day for as long as I live." Evelyn, unable to contain her emotions, responded in kind. "I promise to stand by you, to nurture our family, and to embrace all the joy and challenges that come our way." "We are stronger together," the children cheered, hugging both of them with unreserved enthusiasm. For Lucas and Emma, this was more than a promise. It was a tangible affirmation that they had finally found stability, love and security. Months later, life settled into a rhythm that was comforting, yet vibrant. The apartment no longer felt like a temporary refuge. It was home. Morning routines were filled with laughter. School runs were punctuated with playful banter, and evenings were devoted to family activities. The father, once distant and self-contained, had become fully engaged, coaching Lucas in baseball, helping Emma with her science projects, and celebrating every small achievement. Evelyn, once cautious and reserved, had found her place not just as a protector, but as a partner, a mentor, and a source of unwavering support. Her influence had transformed the family, allowing trust, love, and joy to flourish. One sunny afternoon, the father and Evelyn watched the children build a makeshift fort in the living room, their voices mingling in laughter and playful shouts. The father turned to Evelyn, his expression reflecting awe and affection. "I never thought I could be this happy again," he admitted softly. Evelyn smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from his face. "It's because you opened yourself to it. Love requires courage, and you've proven more courageous than you ever realized." Lucas and Emma paused, noticing the adults watching them, and waved enthusiastically. "We love you, Mom. We love you, Dad." The father and Evelyn shared a glance, their hearts full, knowing that this love, complex, tested, and hard-won, was the foundation of their family. In the weeks that followed, the family faced small challenges, school projects, minor illnesses, and unexpected errands, but each was met with unity, humor, and mutual support. The father realized that true strength was not in isolation or control, but in connection. Evelyn understood that her greatest impact was not measured in victories or accolades, but in the love and stability she fostered. The final turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, while the children were asleep, the father and Evelyn sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. "I never believed in second chances," he confessed. "But now I see that life doesn't end after loss. It begins again, in ways we can't always predict." Evelyn leaned against him, her heart swelling with shared understanding. "And sometimes, the best beginnings come from the smallest acts of courage, like selling a book to save someone you love, or trusting someone with your heart." The father smiled, squeezing her hand. "Here's to the future, ours, together, as a family." And in that quiet moment, beneath the starry sky, the family's journey came full circle. They had endured loss, faced challenges, and confronted fear. But through resilience, courage, and unwavering love, they had discovered a life more extraordinary than any they could have imagined. A life defined not by wealth or status, but by family, trust, and unbreakable bonds.